Ladies and gentlemen, Barry C here with another cryptocurrency video, and the market is dipping slightly. It is, in my opinion, one of the best opportunities and times to accumulate some XRP. Now, ladies and gents, before I get into the crux of the video, I want to stress that in no way, shape, or form is this financial advice. It's just a perspective of someone who's been in crypto since 2016. I've seen the way the markets grow and evolve and move. And look, we found ourselves in a very similar situation heading into November of 2024. We were in a very similar situation at the start of the year, once we got into about February or March of 2025. And we found ourselves in a situation where people could accumulate XRP cheapish. Not as cheap as it's been in the past, but it's still a buying opportunity. Now, the main mistake a lot of people made was this assumption that they would always have access to cheap XRP. And then what happened in November? The market started moving rapidly. XRP went from 50 cents to over $2, over $2.50, $2.60, $2.70 in less than a month. And suddenly the opportunity to buy a 50-cent XRP was now gone. I personally believe that we'll never have access to a 50-cent XRP ever again. And similarly, we saw XRP lead the way over the last couple of weeks, and now we've seen a dip, and XRP is a little bit cheaper. And people have the same mentality, which is, it's going to go back to 50 cents. It'll always be cheap. And then they're going to come to a point where XRP will start rallying. We'll see an alt season kick in. XRP is going to be worth a lot more than it is right now. And people will have the same mentality, which is, I'll wait for it to go back down to 50 cents. And then they'll realize that they won't have access to cheap XRP like that ever again. And more than likely, depending on how high XRP rallies, the new cheap entry point could be $5, it could even be $10. It depends on how high XRP goes. Now, we've seen this happen time and time again from 2017 until now. Like if you would go back and have a look and go, okay, 2017, XRP was listed on most exchanges for 0.006 cents. That's less than 1 cent a coin. And of course, a year later, or less than a year actually, it was suddenly worth over $3 a coin. It did over 100x. And it rallied so high, it actually flipped Ethereum and Bitcoin for a short period of time. Now, people had this assumption when the market started dipping after that fact. They're like, I'll get it cheap again. Yeah, XRP crashed down from $3 down to 10 cents. But you didn't get that 0.006 cents ever again. And as the first bear market kicked in and people watched XRP kind of trade sideways from 10 cents to 15 cents and eventually 19 cents in 2020, then the alt season started kicking in and XRP started rallying. And even with the Ripple vs. SEC lawsuit, we saw XRP go from 15 cents to 19 cents to $1 to $1.60, $1.80. Once again, people had this mentality of, I'll wait for it to go back down to that 15-cent mark. I want that cheap XRP. And you know what? The market went into a bear market. It dipped back down, but then we got 30-cent XRP. We certainly didn't see a 15-cent XRP, and we absolutely never saw a 1-cent XRP ever again. Sure enough, we're back into a bear market, and XRP is trading sideways, and so we see 30 cents, 40 cents, 50 cents, 60 cents, all the way up until November of 2024. And then the market starts rallying again, and then we go from 50 cents to over $2. And now the same mentality is prevailing, which is it's going to go back down to 50 cents. Now, we've never seen that happen in the history of XRP. We've never seen it go back down to the price it was before the first leg up of the bull run. It's never happened, and it's not going to suddenly start happening now. And that is one of the biggest mistakes I see people make on a consistent basis. They look at these dips and they go, it's going to be cheaper. They sideline themselves until it's too late. And that's how people end up FOMOing into XRP at much higher price points. And that's not going to change with a utility run either. The same way people conduct themselves in alt seasons is the exact same way people are going to conduct themselves in a utility run. Now, look, I understand if it's a situation where you've bought the dip and you keep buying the dips and you don't have any more resources left. That's understandable. Now, ladies and gents, let's say you buy the dip, or let's say you've bought as many dips as you can. The remaining thing to do is hold. Now, as I said, this is not financial advice, but I'm seeing a lot of people lately not understanding how this holding or how kind of crypto fits in to, I guess, a 4-year cycle, and why they would have to keep holding, and they get impatient and they get frustrated because their crypto isn't doing anything. Now, unfortunately, even XRP is still tied to this 4-year cycle. And what that means is for about 3.5 years out of 4 years, you're holding. You're accumulating, you're holding, you're waiting. And I see a lot of people who get impatient and then they try and chase green candles elsewhere. And sometimes they compromise their XRP holdings because they want to chase a pump, because they become impatient. And a lot of people learnt the hard way that they compromise their XRP bags too prematurely. And then they don't get an opportunity to buy back in cheaply. And we saw this happen in November. We saw this happen recently where people had sold their XRP prematurely. And then now they're watching from the sidelines as they realize how badly they fumbled their XRP bags and compromised the amount of profit they could have made. And that's a really hard lesson to learn. And it's a very important thing to understand going into crypto, because you're not going to buy an asset today and then tomorrow it does 1,000x. I mean, look, there's always a possibility when it comes to crypto, but I would say more than likely not. That's why it's so important to have patience and have fortitude and build a plan and understand there's going to be short-term, mid-term, and long-term potential when it comes to taking profit. Now, unfortunately, even with XRP, it's still tied to that 4-year cycle. We haven't seen a utility run yet. And unfortunately, most cryptos are going to adhere to that Bitcoin halving, post-halving bull run, alt season, alt rally, and then the bear market. That's just the way it's going to work until something different comes along. And that something different is banks and financial institutions announcing that they're utilizing blockchain technology and announcing that they're going to be utilizing XRP. Once that happens, that is something entirely different that we've never seen happen in the entire history of crypto. There is no blueprint to go back and have a look at and say, oh, look, that's where a bank announced they were utilizing Bitcoin, for example. It's never happened. So we haven't seen the effects of millions and billions and trillions of dollars flowing directly into a crypto on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis. But we could potentially see that with XRP. And once that happens, it's no longer a case of, well, it's a volatile asset that is pretty much 60% down for 3.5 out of every 4 years. And then a small window of opportunity comes along where it rallies. There's no way banks or financial institutions will utilize an asset that is that volatile. They're going to utilize the technology of the number one crypto in finance. All that money is going to flow directly into XRP, and effectively, you're going to see XRP decouple from the rest of the crypto market. It will exist in a class of its own. And once it does that, it's going to rally to a much higher price point, and essentially it'll stabilize there. Because once all that money is flowing into XRP, it's never shutting off. As long as banks and financial institutions are open and trading and people are conducting finance, that money will always be flowing through XRP. And that's not financial advice, ladies and gents. That is just the realistic future potential of where XRP could go. And so when I look at days like today or the last couple of days where the market is dipping and XRP has become a little bit cheaper than what it was, I look to XRP and I say to myself, I can get the number one crypto in finance that cheaply. That is pretty remarkable. And I know, once again, it can be very frustrating. We want the market to perform exceedingly well. We want to see XRP hit prices that far exceed all expectations. I get it. Trust me, I want that as well. I want to see $100 XRP. I want to see $1,000 XRP. Look, even a $10,000, like however high it could rally, I want to see all of it. But I understand that that's going to take some time. But I also understand that once there is that shift, Once banks and financial institutions make that decision to embrace blockchain technology and to utilize XRP, that's it. There's no more second opportunities. There's no more XRP crashing back down 60, 70% and allowing people a second or third chance to accumulate XRP cheaply. Those opportunities go away forever, especially when banks and financial institutions are utilizing XRP on a global scale. That's it. And as I said, XRP will rally, XRP will stabilize at a much higher price point. And that's exactly what's going to happen with people as they've done every bull run from 2017 until now. People are going to FOMO in a much higher price point. People will willingly and happily pay for $100 XRP or $1,000 XRP because that's where they're going to essentially hear about XRP when it reaches that crazy price point. That's going to be the majority of people's entry point into crypto and into XRP. The same way people were going crazy about Bitcoin in 2017 when it started rallying into the tens of thousands. There was no one really interested in it back in 2016 when it was worth a couple of $100. But you better believe when it started going above $10,000, people were desperately interested and desperately FOMOing into Bitcoin because it was the thing that people were terrified that they were going to miss out on. And the exact same thing is going to happen with XRP. When XRP starts rallying to $100, $1,000, maybe even more, people are going to want to own a portion of the new financial system, and they'll be terrified that they may miss that opportunity. So as I said, ladies and gents, not financial advice, but this is what I think about. I think about that short-term, mid-term, long-term price point potential. When I look at days like today or when the market dips, I look at XRP now and I think to myself, do I want to pay $3 for XRP? Or would I rather pay $30 or $100 or $1,000? What are the things and the decisions that I can make right now to put myself in the best position possible to make life-changing profits in the future? Now, ladies and gents, as always, none of this is financial advice. Now, if you've enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. And if you're curious about the other cryptos I hold outside of XRP, consider becoming a Patreon. Click the link in the description below, head across to my Patreon page, and consider becoming a Barry C VIP. There you'll have access to all the cryptos I hold, as well as my buy, sell, and take profit signals in real time.